Commander Zixtal stared at the empty communication board with growing confusion. In his 40 years of service aboard the Galactic Council's monitoring station, he had never seen anything like this. The massive holographic display that usually showed thousands of active transmission lines from across the galaxy now had dark spaces where human signals should be. The Vrexian commander's scaled hands moved across the control panel as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Every day for the past 3 centuries, human worlds sent out their usual stream of messages: trade negotiations, diplomatic communications, distress calls from merchant ships, and the endless chatter of human civilian networks. Today there was nothing. Chief Veltar, Zixtal called to his technical officer. The Aquarian engineer floated over in his environmental suit, his gill slits fluttering with concern. Are our receivers working correctly? Veltar's webbed fingers danced over his instruments. All systems show green, Commander. I ran 3 full diagnostics this morning. Everything is perfect on our end. The monitoring station Kepler Prime orbited a neutral world between Council space and the outer colonies. From here, they could track communications from hundreds of civilizations across 12 spiral arms of the galaxy. The station never slept, never stopped watching the endless flow of information that kept galactic civilization connected. Dr. Krishan joined them at the main console. The xenobiologist's 6 eyes studied the data streams with scientific interest. This is unprecedented, she said in her musical voice. Human communication networks have been active since they joined the galactic community 297 years ago. They have never gone completely silent. Zixtal pulled up historical records. The data was clear. Even during the synthetic wars, even during the Great Plague of 2387, even during their own civil conflicts, humans had maintained some level of interstellar communication. They were, if anything, more talkative than most species. Their merchant ships alone generated more daily traffic than entire star systems of other civilizations. Could it be a system-wide power failure? Veltar suggested. Maybe solar flares, or some kind of electromagnetic event. Impossible, Dr. Krishan replied. Humans have colonies in 47 different star systems. The probability of simultaneous power failures across such a vast area is effectively 0. The 3 officers stood in silence, watching the empty channels where human voices should be. Other species continued their normal communications. The crystalline hive mind sent their harmonic frequencies across their network. The gaseous coalition transmitted their chemical signatures through specialized relays. The silicon architects shared their mathematical equations in perfect digital streams. Everyone was talking except the humans. We need to inform the Council, Zixtal decided. This could be a security issue. Within hours, representatives from 12 major civilizations gathered in the Council chambers. Chancellor Morden, a tall being from the ancient ethereal race, called the emergency session to order. His translucent form shimmered as he addressed the assembly. We have a situation that requires immediate attention, he began. As of this morning, all human-controlled systems have gone completely silent. The reaction was mixed. The thermal scorians raised their internal temperature, their way of showing distress. The Prophet Collective's representatives immediately started calculating economic impacts. The mechanical assembly simply processed the data without emotion. Perhaps they finally realized they should keep quiet, muttered Ambassador Hexalon from the Territorial Dominion. Several species made sounds of agreement. Humans had a reputation for being too involved in everyone else's business. Dr. Krishan stepped forward. With respect, Ambassador, this is not normal behavior. I have studied human psychology for decades. They are social creatures who thrive on communication and interaction. For them to go silent suggests something serious has happened. What do you propose? Chancellor Morden asked. We send a probe to investigate. The nearest human colony is New California, only 47 light-years from here. A fast scout ship could reach it in less than a week. The Council debated for 3 hours. Some representatives worried about invading human space without invitation. Others argued that the humans had probably just developed new communication technology and forgotten to update their relay protocols. The crystalline hive mind suggested that perhaps humans had evolved beyond the need for electronic communication. Finally, Chancellor Morden called for a vote. The motion to send an investigation probe passed by a narrow margin. Captain Dorian volunteered his scout ship Farseeker for the mission. The young captain had traded with humans before and knew their territory well. His ship was fast and equipped with the latest scanning equipment. The journey to New California took 6 days. Captain Dorian sent regular reports as he approached the human system. Everything appeared normal at first. The star was stable, the planets were in their correct orbits, and space traffic control beacons were still functioning. But as the Farseeker entered the inner system, something felt wrong. The usual busy traffic of cargo haulers and passenger shuttles was absent. The orbital stations that should have been buzzing with activity floated dark and silent. Captain Dorian deployed his scanning drones and began a detailed survey of the system. What he found made no sense. The cities on New California's surface were intact but empty. Spaceports showed no signs of recent activity. Ships sat powered down in their docking bays as if their crews had simply walked away. The most disturbing discovery came when the drones investigated the orbital habitats. These massive structures housed millions of humans who worked in the zero-gravity manufacturing facilities. The habitats were undamaged, their life support systems still running, but they were completely deserted. Captain Dorian recorded everything and prepared to return to Kepler Prime. As his ship turned away from New California, he took one last look at the human world. Somewhere down there in the empty cities and silent spaceports was a mystery that would change the galaxy forever. The Farseeker arrived back at the monitoring station 7 days later. Captain Dorian's report sent shockwaves through the Council. The evidence was undeniable. An entire human colony, home to over 50 million people, had been abandoned without explanation. There are no signs of violence, Captain Dorian reported to the assembled representatives. No debris, no damage, no bodies. It's as if everyone simply disappeared overnight. The crystalline hive mind vibrated at frequencies that translated to deep concern. The thermal scorian's temperatures spiked dangerously. Even the logical silicon architects showed computational anomalies when they processed the data. Chancellor Morden studied the holographic images from New California. Empty streets, abandoned vehicles, silent communication towers. We must investigate other human systems, he decided. If this has happened to one colony, it may have happened to all of them. As the council session ended, several representatives privately expressed relief. The humans had always been too aggressive, too involved in galactic affairs. If they had chosen to remove themselves, perhaps it would make governing easier. But Dr. Krishan felt a growing sense of unease. In all her years of studying different species, she had never seen anything like this. Humans didn't just disappear. They were fighters, survivors, problem solvers. If they were gone, there had to be a reason. And she was beginning to suspect that reason would matter to everyone in the galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Dorian returned from New California with his disturbing footage. The Galactic Council had sent probe missions to 6 more human worlds, and each one told the same impossible story. Empty cities, abandoned, spaceports, and not a single human to be found anywhere. Merchant Captain Horvex of the Golden Nebula was the first to notice how the disappearance was affecting everyday life. He stood in the cargo bay of his ship, explaining to his mixed crew why their next shipping run would take twice as long and earn half the profit. The problem is simple, he told them, his tentacles gesturing at a holographic star map. Humans ran the transfer stations between incompatible species. The methane breathers can't share space with oxygen users. The high-gravity species can't work alongside the low-gravity ones. Humans were the only ones who could adapt to everyone's needs. His cargo officer, a silicon-based being named Unit 47, processed this information. Clarification requested. How did humans accomplish this adaptation? They built special facilities, Horvex explained. Environmental suits that let them work in any atmosphere. Stations with multiple habitat zones. Translation software that could handle the chemical signatures of gas-based species and the mathematical languages of silicon mines. Without those transfer points, we have to take much longer routes. The Golden Nebula was not alone in facing these problems. Throughout the galaxy, merchant ships were discovering that their familiar trade routes no longer worked. The efficient network that had connected dozens of civilizations was breaking down. On the industrial world of Forge 7, the mechanical assembly was having their own difficulties. Production Supervisor Prime 9 studied the output reports with growing concern. Their manufacturing efficiency had dropped by 40% in just 3 weeks. The human consultants are not responding to our requests for assistance, reported Secondary Unit 23. Our current production algorithms are based on their efficiency protocols. Prime 9 accessed the historical data. Humans had been working with the mechanical assembly for over a century, gradually improving their manufacturing processes. They had a gift for spotting inefficiencies that even the logical assembly minds missed. Their suggestions always seemed obvious after implementation, but somehow the assembly could never think of them independently. Attempt to continue production using previous protocols, Prime 9 ordered. But reverting to older systems caused new problems. The assembly had grown dependent on human-designed workflow improvements. Without those enhancements, their factories ran at pre-human efficiency levels, and demand far exceeded their reduced output. Dr. Krishan was discovering similar patterns throughout her research. She had expanded her investigation to include economic and infrastructure data from across the galaxy. What she found was troubling. Humans weren't just another member species, she explained to Commander Zixtal as they reviewed her findings. They had somehow become integral to how galactic civilization functions. The evidence was everywhere once she knew to look for it. Human-designed communication protocols that helped species with incompatible language structures understand each other. Human-engineered power systems that were more efficient than anything other species had developed. Human diplomatic methods that resolved conflicts other civilizations couldn't solve. Look at this, Dr. Krishan said, displaying a network diagram. This shows the communication relays in the outer rim. See these nodes marked in blue? Those are human-built signal boosters. Without them, half the colonies out there can't maintain contact with their homeworlds. Commander Zixtal studied the display. I had no idea humans were involved in so much infrastructure. Neither did anyone else, Dr. Krishan replied. They didn't make a big deal about it. They just quietly solved problems and made things work better. The first major crisis came sooner than anyone expected. Admiral Nexus of the Aquarian Federation received an emergency distress call from the Botanical Collective. A massive asteroid field had shifted course and was threatening their homeworld of Garden Prime. We need immediate assistance, the plant-based beings transmitted through chemical signals. Our population cannot be evacuated quickly enough using our own ships. This was exactly the kind of emergency that would normally be handled by human demolition experts. They had developed techniques for breaking up dangerous asteroids and were the galaxy's acknowledged specialists in complex orbital mechanics. Their calculations were always precise, and their methods caused minimal environmental damage. Admiral Nexus assembled the best non-human team he could find. Crystalline mathematicians worked with silicon architects to calculate blast patterns. Thermal scorians provided the explosive expertise. The mechanical assembly contributed their most advanced mining equipment. The operation took 3 weeks instead of the usual 3 days. Without human coordination and problem-solving skills, the different species had trouble working together effectively. The crystalline's harmonic calculations didn't translate well to silicon mathematical frameworks. The scorian's heat-based explosives damaged the assembly's precision equipment. Communication delays caused timing errors that reduced efficiency. When they finally cleared the asteroid field, the cost was 17 times higher than similar human-led operations, and the Botanical Collective's evacuation had caused significant damage to their delicate ecosystem. This cannot continue, Admiral Nexus reported to the Council. We managed this crisis, but barely. If we face multiple emergencies simultaneously, we will not be able to respond effectively. More problems surfaced. Daily, The gaseous coalition discovered that their atmospheric processors on 3 different worlds were failing. These systems had been upgraded years ago using human-developed adaptive protocols. Without human technicians to maintain the upgrades, the processors were reverting to older, less efficient operations. Chief Engineer Veltar led a repair mission to the Coalition's primary world. What should have been a routine maintenance job turned into a month-long crisis. The human technical documentation was written in a way that multiple species could understand and implement. But without humans to explain the subtle details, the repair team struggled with concepts that seemed simple, but proved complex in practice. Human engineering is different, Veltar explained to his frustrated team. They design systems that can be maintained by anyone, but they also anticipate problems that haven't happened yet. Their redundancy networks are so sophisticated that we didn't even know they existed until they started failing. The Prophet Collective was facing their own version of the same problem. Their interspecies banking system relied on human-designed fraud detection algorithms. These programs had been learning and adapting for decades, becoming incredibly sophisticated at spotting unusual transaction patterns that might indicate criminal activity. Without human oversight, the system began producing false positives and eventually shut down several major trade networks rather than risk allowing fraudulent transactions. The economic disruption affected dozens of worlds within days. Humans understood psychology in ways we do not, admitted financial coordinator Grixtal of the Prophet Collective. Their fraud detection didn't just look for mathematical anomalies. It recognized behavioral patterns that indicated deception. We cannot replicate this capability. As the problems multiplied, Dr. Krishan made another disturbing discovery. While investigating the abandoned human worlds, her research team found evidence of extensive backup systems and contingency plans that humans had established throughout the galaxy. They knew this might happen, she told Commander Zixtal. Not specifically, but they prepared for the possibility that other species might need to function without them. The evidence was subtle but undeniable. Human engineers had built redundant systems into critical infrastructure. Human diplomats had trained backup negotiators from other species. Human merchants had established emergency supply networks that could function independently. It's as if they were preparing the galaxy to survive without them, Dr. Krishan observed. But even with these preparations, the systems were failing faster than anyone had anticipated. 3 months of human absence had revealed the uncomfortable truth that no one wanted to acknowledge. Galactic civilization had become dependent on humanity's unique abilities without ever realizing it. The species that had once viewed humans as overly aggressive and too involved in everyone else's business were beginning to understand that human involvement had been holding their civilization together, and now that involvement was gone. 2 months after humanity's disappearance, the first major infrastructure disaster struck the thermal Scorian Empire. High Chancellor Blazemore was in his palace chambers when the emergency alerts began flooding in from across their homeworld, of Furnace Prime. The planetary cooling systems that kept their cities at survivable temperatures were failing one by one. These massive installations had been designed by Scorian engineers centuries ago, but over the decades they had been upgraded and maintained using human-developed adaptive artificial intelligence protocols. The cooling towers in Sector 7 have shut down completely, reported Emergency Coordinator Berndahl. Internal temperatures are rising beyond safe limits. We need to evacuate 3 million citizens immediately. High Chancellor Blazemore's internal temperature spiked with stress. Contact the human technical advisors. We need their help now. My lord. Berndahl's voice carried the weight of bad news. There are no human advisors to contact. They have all disappeared, remember? The reality hit Blazemore like a plasma burst. For generations, his people had relied on human experts to maintain their most critical systems. The humans had a gift for creating artificial intelligence that could adapt to changing conditions and predict problems before they became critical failures. Chief Engineer Veltar arrived from the Aquarian Federation with an emergency repair team. He floated in his environmental suit through the sweltering heat of the Scorian repair facility, studying the massive cooling systems with growing frustration. The hardware is still functional, he reported to Chancellor Blazemore through his comm system. The problem is with the control software, it's more sophisticated than anything we understand. The human-designed AI had been learning and evolving for decades. It didn't just control temperature. It predicted weather patterns, monitored solar activity, adjusted for seasonal changes, and even compensated for the thermal effects of industrial activity. The system had become so advanced that it operated on principles the Scorians no longer fully understood. "Can you restore the old control systems?" Blazemore asked. "We're trying," Veltar replied. "But the old systems can't handle the current power loads. Your cities have grown beyond what the original cooling towers were designed for. The human upgrades made that growth possible. The repairs took 3 weeks instead of the usual 3 days. During that time, 3 Scorian cities had to be completely evacuated. The economic and social disruption was enormous, and it was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, the crystalline hive mind was experiencing something they had never encountered before. Individual crystalline beings began reporting feelings of isolation and confusion as their vast communication network started experiencing cascading failures. Resonance Coordinator Prime Crystal attempted to diagnose the problem from the Central Harmony Chamber. The network that connected 17 star systems and billions of crystalline consciousness was breaking down in ways that made no sense. "The signal degradation is not following predicted patterns," Prime Crystal reported to the other coordinators. "Our harmonic frequencies are being distorted during long-distance transmission." Investigation teams discovered that human-designed signal boosters had been quietly installed throughout their network over the past several decades. These devices didn't just amplify crystalline harmonic communications. They translated and optimized the frequencies for transmission across vast distances, compensating for interference from stellar radiation and gravitational fields. The crystallines had never fully understood how these boosters worked. Human engineers had presented them as simple amplification devices, but they were actually sophisticated translation systems that made interstellar crystalline communication possible. Without these human devices, our network range is reduced to a single star system, Prime Crystal realized with horror. Our civilization is built on shared consciousness across multiple worlds. If we cannot maintain contact, our society will fragment. The political situation was deteriorating just as rapidly. Chancellor Morden faced the Council's most serious crisis in centuries as long-standing disputes between member species erupted into open hostilities. The Gaseous Coalition and the Silicon Architects were on the verge of armed conflict over mining rights in the Vale Nebula. Ambassador Hexlon of the Territorial Dominion was demanding exclusive access to 3 uninhabited systems. The Prophet Collective was threatening to cut off trade with anyone who supported territorial expansion by other species. "These are the same disputes we have been managing for decades," Chancellor Morden observed to his senior advisors. "What has changed?" His diplomatic corps had the answer, though it was not one anyone wanted to hear. "Human mediators, Your Excellency," replied Senior Diplomat Visara. They had a unique talent for finding solutions that satisfied everyone's core needs, while addressing concerns that the parties hadn't even expressed openly. The evidence was in the historical records. Every major interspecies agreement for the past century had involved human diplomatic input. They didn't dominate the negotiations, but they had a gift for understanding what each species really needed and finding creative ways to give it to them. "The humans understood our psychology better than we understand each other," Wisara continued. "They could predict how different species would react to various proposals and suggest modifications that would make deals acceptable to everyone without human diplomatic expertise. Old conflicts were resurging. Species that had cooperated for decades were remembering ancient grievances. Trade agreements that had seemed obviously beneficial were being questioned and abandoned. Dr. Krishan was making disturbing discoveries in her ongoing research. Her expanded investigation into human activities had revealed the true scope of their involvement in galactic civilization. They weren't just helpful, she explained to Commander Zixtal as they reviewed her latest findings. They were the glue, holding everything together. Her data painted a comprehensive picture. Humans had been quietly solving problems for other species for generations, often without the other species realizing the extent of human involvement. They had developed a galaxy-wide reputation as the species you contacted when standard solutions weren't working. The research team had found evidence of human involvement in everything from agricultural improvements on botanical worlds to mathematical theorems that helped silicon architects optimize their computational networks. Human psychologists had helped the crystalline hive mind understand individual identity. Human engineers had designed safety systems for gaseous coalition atmospheric processors. "Look at this traffic analysis," Dr. Krishan said, displaying a three-dimensional model of galactic communication patterns. Human space isn't just connected to other civilizations. It's the hub that connects civilizations to each other. The model showed how human relay stations and translation services had enabled species with incompatible communication methods to work together. Chemical-based messages from gas giant civilizations were converted to mathematical formats for silicon-based species. Harmonic frequencies from crystalline beings were translated into thermal patterns for energy-based life forms. Without these human translation networks, half the species in the Council can't effectively communicate with the other half, Commander Zixtal realized. The crisis deepened when multiple emergency situations occurred simultaneously. The botanical collective's agricultural worlds experienced widespread crop failures when their orbital growth enhancement satellites malfunctioned. The Prophet Collective's interstellar banking system crashed when anti-fraud algorithms stopped receiving regular updates. The Mechanical Assembly's manufacturing networks went offline due to coordination protocol failures. In the past, human emergency response teams would have handled these crises with practiced efficiency. Human agricultural experts would have quickly diagnosed and repaired the satellite problems. Human financial analysts would have restored the banking systems. Human logistics coordinators would have gotten the manufacturing networks back online. Instead, each crisis had to be handled by species with limited experience in emergency management. Response times were slow, solutions were inefficient, and problems that should have been resolved quickly dragged on for weeks. Chancellor Morden called an emergency session of the full council. Representatives from all major civilizations gathered to address what was becoming clear to everyone. Galactic civilization was failing without humanity's stabilizing influence. "We must face an uncomfortable truth," Chancellor Morden addressed the assembly. "We have become dependent on human capabilities without acknowledging that dependence. Our civilization cannot function effectively without their unique contributions." The crystalline hive mind's harmonic response translated as deep concern. The thermal scorian's elevated temperatures indicated distress. Even the logical silicon architects showed computational anomalies when processing the implications. "The question before us is simple," Chancellor Morden continued. "Can we adapt to function without humans, or do we need to find them and bring them back?" As the debate began, 3 civilizations were already mobilizing military forces for conflicts that human diplomats would have prevented. Economic systems were collapsing without human financial expertise. 4 months after humanity's disappearance, the Galactic Order began its complete collapse. Admiral Nexus was reviewing defense reports in his command center aboard the Aquarian flagship Deep Current when the emergency alert came through. "Admiral, we have a situation," his communications officer reported. The early warning system failed to detect a massive pirate fleet approaching Commerce 3. Admiral Nexus felt his gill slits flutter with concern. Commerce 3 was one of the galaxy's busiest trade worlds, home to representatives from dozens of species. A successful pirate attack there would be devastating not just economically but politically. "How did our detection grid miss an entire fleet?" he demanded. His technical officer, a young Aquarian named Depthfinder, brought up the diagnostic reports. "Sir, the grid's pattern recognition software has been producing increasingly unreliable results for the past month. Yesterday it shut down completely to prevent system corruption. The detection grid was a marvel of engineering that protected the core worlds from threats. Its sophisticated sensors could identify potential dangers from across multiple star systems, but the real genius was in its software. The system could distinguish between legitimate merchant traffic and suspicious vessel movements using behavioral analysis algorithms. The software was originally designed by our own engineers," Depthfinder explained. but it has been continuously upgraded for decades using human-developed learning protocols. Admiral Nexus understood immediately. Human artificial intelligence specialists had taught the system to recognize subtle patterns that indicated hostile intent. Over time, the software had become incredibly sophisticated at predicting threats based on tiny irregularities in ship movements, communication patterns, and energy signatures. Without human oversight, the learning algorithms began producing false results and eventually shut down, rather than risk allowing actual threats through their filters. Depthfinder continued. The pirate attack succeeded completely. 3,000 beings from 17 different species were killed or captured. The pirates made off with cargo worth more than some planets' annual budgets, and they did it with impunity because the galaxy's defenders couldn't see them coming. But the immediate tragedy was only part of the disaster. Commerce 3's evacuation protocols had assumed that human search and rescue teams would be available for cross-species coordination. Without them, the evacuation became a chaotic nightmare that cost thousands of additional lives. Captain Horvex, who had been docked at Commerce 3 during the attack, witnessed the evacuation disaster firsthand. It was horrible, he reported to the Council later. Different species couldn't communicate effectively with each other. Oxygen breathers were trying to rescue methane users without proper equipment. High-gravity species were moving too slowly to help low-gravity refugees. The whole thing was a mess. Dr. Krishan's research team was making breakthrough discoveries, but the news they brought was both hopeful and terrifying. Deep space sensors had detected massive construction projects in the outer regions of human territory. These structures are unlike anything we've seen before, Dr. Krishan reported to Commander Zixtal. They're enormous, clearly artificial, but built using principles that don't match any known architectural styles. The crystalline hive mind, despite their ongoing communication difficulties, had been detecting faint signals from the direction of human space. The signals appeared to be some form of encrypted communication, but they used mathematical principles that none of the Council species recognized. The encryption is beyond our ability to decode, reported Prime Crystal through the damaged communication network. The mathematical frameworks appear to be based on dimensional theories that we do not understand. Chief Engineer Veltar studied the sensor data with growing amazement. The energy requirements for these construction projects would exceed the total power output of most civilizations, he calculated. Whatever the humans are building, it's on a scale we've never imagined. Chancellor Morden made the decision that would change everything. Despite the risks, despite the fact that no exploration mission had ever returned from deep human space, the Council had to know what was happening. We will send a reconnaissance mission, he announced to the assembled representatives. We need answers, and we need them before our civilization collapses completely. Captain Dorian volunteered his ship Farseeker for the dangerous journey. The young captain had performed the initial investigation of New California and knew human space better than anyone else in the exploration service. While preparations for the mission began, the galaxy's situation continued to deteriorate. The Botanical Collective's agricultural crisis deepened when 3 more orbital satellites failed simultaneously. Without human technical expertise, the repair efforts were taking months instead of days. Our food production has dropped by 60%, reported Grove Tender Prime Leaf to the Council. If we cannot restore our orbital enhancement systems, we will face starvation within a year. The Prophet Collective's banking crisis had spread throughout the galactic economy. Without human-designed fraud detection and risk assessment algorithms, interspecies trade had become too dangerous for most merchants to attempt. We are seeing a return to primitive barter systems, reported Financial Coordinator Grixtal. Species that don't trust each other's currency are reverting to direct exchanges of goods. Trade volume has dropped by 75%. Most critically, the Council's own governing systems were breaking down. The legislative process that had maintained peace between dozens of species for centuries relied on human diplomatic translation services to ensure that complex concepts could be communicated clearly between species with vastly different ways of thinking. We are experiencing our first parliamentary deadlock in over 200 years, Senior Diplomat Wisara informed Chancellor Morden privately. The gaseous coalition's chemical-based thought patterns cannot be accurately translated into the Silicon Architect's mathematical frameworks without human intermediary interpretation. The situation became desperate when 3 different military conflicts erupted simultaneously. The territorial dominion launched surprise attacks on 2 disputed systems. The gaseous coalition began mobilizing their atmospheric warfare fleets. The thermal scorians started heating up their battle asteroids. In the past, human peacekeeping forces would have intervened immediately, not because they were the strongest military power, but because they had the diplomatic skills to negotiate ceasefires that all parties could accept. Human mediators understood the underlying causes of conflicts and could address them before they escalated to violence. We are witnessing the breakdown of the galactic peace that has lasted for 3 centuries, Chancellor Morden observed grimly. Without human diplomatic intervention, old grievances are resurging and new conflicts are emerging faster than we can address them. The reconnaissance mission to human space launched amid this chaos. Captain Dorian's ship Farseeker was equipped with the most advanced sensors available and carried a volunteer crew from 6 different species. If they failed to return, it would be months before another mission could be organized. As the Farseeker disappeared into hyperspace, heading toward the mysterious construction projects in human territory, the galaxy held its collective breath. Whatever they discovered would determine whether galactic civilization could be saved, or whether it would collapse into the chaos and conflict that had existed before humanity joined the galactic community. The species that had once viewed humans as overly aggressive and too involved in galactic affairs were finally beginning to understand the true scope of what they had lost. Humanity hadn't been trying to dominate or control other civilizations. They had been holding the galaxy together through service, expertise, and an almost supernatural ability to find solutions that worked for everyone. Now that they were gone, the carefully balanced system they had helped create was falling apart. The only question remaining was whether Captain Dorian would find them in time to save the civilization they had left behind. Captain Dorian and his crew aboard the Farseeker had been traveling through hyperspace for 8 days when their sensors detected something impossible. The space ahead of them was filled with structures that defied every principle of known engineering. "Captain," his sensor officer reported with awe in her voice, "these constructions are the size of small moons, but they're not solid. They appear to be dimensional framework devices of some kind." As the Farseeker dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory, the crew stared in amazement at what humanity had built. Massive ring-shaped structures floated in perfectly, organized formations, each one crackling with energy that seemed to bend space itself. "Those aren't just buildings," whispered Navigation Officer Keltar. "They're gateways." Before Captain Dorian could respond, his communication system activated with an incoming message. The voice that spoke was unmistakably human, but it carried a weariness that spoke of terrible experiences. "Unidentified vessel. This is Admiral Lisa Murphy of the Human Defense Force aboard the command ship Eternal Guardian. You are entering a restricted military zone. State your purpose immediately." Captain Dorian felt relief flood through him. "Admiral Murphy, this is Captain Dorian of the Galactic Council exploration vessel Farseeker. We've been searching for humanity for months. The galaxy needs your help." There was a long pause before Admiral Murphy responded. "Captain, you need to understand something. We didn't disappear. We withdrew from normal space to fight a war that would have destroyed everything, you know. Follow my beacon to the command station. What I'm about to show you will change how you see the universe." The Eternal Guardian was unlike any human ship Captain Dorian had ever seen. It was massive, heavily armed, and bore scars from battles that must have been beyond imagination. As the Farseeker docked, Captain Dorian noticed that the human crew members they encountered looked older, harder, and carried themselves like soldiers who had seen too much combat. Admiral Murphy met them in the briefing room. She was a woman, in her 50s, with gray hair and eyes that had seen horrors beyond description. "Captain Dorian, I'm going to tell you something that will be difficult to believe, but the survival of our galaxy depends on you understanding it." She activated a holographic display that showed parallel dimensions existing alongside their own reality. 18 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected energy signatures that didn't belong to our universe. we discovered that reality has cracks, and something was coming through them. The images that followed were nightmarish. Creatures of pure malevolence that consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Beings that existed outside normal physics and could corrupt reality itself just by entering it. These entities come from dimensions where different physical laws apply, Admiral Murphy explained. They feed on organized matter and energy. To them, our entire galaxy is nothing but food. Captain Dorian struggled to process this information. Why didn't humanity warn the Council about this threat? We tried to develop countermeasures using conventional military forces, Admiral Murphy replied. It didn't work. These beings can't be fought using normal weapons or tactics. They exist, partially outside our dimension, which makes them nearly invulnerable to conventional attacks. She showed them footage of the first encounters, human fleets engaging creatures that seemed to phase in and out of reality. Weapons that passed harmlessly through targets that could destroy entire planets with a touch. We realized that defeating them would require technology and strategies that we didn't possess, so we made a decision that I hope history will forgive us for. The holographic display showed the massive dimensional gateway network they had witnessed. We developed technology that allows us to enter parallel dimensions where these entities exist. We've been fighting them in their own realm for the past 6 months. Captain Dorian's crew listened in stunned silence as Admiral Murphy explained humanity's sacrifice. They had withdrawn from galactic civilization not out of choice but out of necessity. The interdimensional war required every human resource, every ship, every person capable of fighting. The cost has been enormous, Admiral Murphy continued, her voice heavy with grief. 60% of humanity's population has been lost in this war. Our entire civilization has been transformed into a military society focused on one goal, stopping these entities from reaching our reality. Navigation Officer Keltar asked the question they were all thinking. Admiral, if humanity has been fighting this war, why is the galaxy experiencing so many problems? Admiral Murphy's expression grew sad. Because we had to leave. We knew that our withdrawal would cause difficulties for other species, but we believed that temporary hardship was preferable to total annihilation. She displayed data showing the extent of humanity's involvement in galactic civilization. We didn't realize how dependent other species had become on our problem-solving abilities and support systems. We thought the difficulties would last a few months while everyone adapted. The revelation reframed everything the galaxy had experienced. Humanity's role as mediators, problem-solvers, and infrastructure specialists hadn't been accidental. It had been preparation for the possibility that someday they might need to step away to face a greater threat. We've been the galaxy's immune system, Admiral Murphy explained. Our species evolved on a world where cooperation and adaptability were necessary for survival. Those traits made us naturally suited to helping other species work together and solving problems that seemed impossible. Captain Dorian realized the truth that Dr. Krishan had been discovering through her research. You've been quietly strengthening galactic civilization, building redundancies and training backup systems because you knew this day might come. Not this specifically, Admiral Murphy admitted, but we understood that threats could emerge that might require us to focus all our attention elsewhere. We tried to prepare the galaxy to function without us, but apparently, we underestimated how integrated we had become. She showed them the current status of the interdimensional war. The good news is that we're winning. The enemy forces have been pushed back to their original dimensions, and we've developed weapons that can permanently seal the dimensional rifts. But the cost of victory was visible in every human face they encountered. A species that had once been known for their optimism and problem-solving enthusiasm had been transformed into battle-hardened warriors, carrying the weight of saving not just their own galaxy, but countless parallel versions of it. The war will be over within weeks, Admiral Murphy continued. We can return to normal space and begin helping to rebuild what our absence has damaged, but things will be different. She explained that humanity's population had been devastated by the war. Their technology had advanced in military applications but had fallen behind in civilian sectors. Most critically, an entire generation of humans had grown up knowing only war. We'll need time to readjust to peaceful civilization, she said. And the galaxy will need to learn to function more independently. We can help rebuild, but we can't return to the level of involvement we had before. Captain Dorian understood the implications. The species that had taken humanity's contributions for granted would need to develop their own capabilities. The easy cooperation that humans had facilitated would require more effort from everyone involved. 3 weeks later, human ships began appearing throughout the galaxy. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had been on the verge of war suddenly found human mediators available to help resolve their conflicts. Infrastructure that had been failing was quickly repaired by human technical teams. Trade networks that had collapsed were restored by human logistics coordinators, but the humans who returned were changed. Admiral Murphy's warning proved accurate. The survivors of the interdimensional war carried themselves differently. They were still helpful, still willing to solve problems for other species, but there was a hardness in their eyes that spoke of battles beyond imagination. Chancellor Mordun formally thanked Admiral Murphy and the human survivors in a ceremony broadcast throughout the galaxy. Humanity has made a sacrifice that saved not just our civilization, but reality itself, he announced. We owe them a debt that can never be fully repaid. But even as he spoke those words, Chancellor Mordun was privately noting in his personal records that the galaxy must never again become so dependent on any single species that their temporary absence could threaten civilization itself. The irony was not lost on him. Even as he wrote about reducing dependence on humanity, he was relying on human diplomatic protocols to ensure his message could be understood by all species in the Council. The Human Heritage Foundation was established within months of humanity's return. This new galactic institution was dedicated to preserving and sharing the problem-solving methodologies and cooperative frameworks that humanity had developed over centuries. The goal was practical and ambitious. If humanity ever again faced the need to withdraw from galactic affairs, other species would be better prepared to maintain the civilization they had all built together. But as the Foundation's first director, Dr. Krishan, observed in her opening address,